Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. Hello and welcome. As is my routine that has become established whilst living here, after my meal and cleaning up, I enjoy a nice cup of local coffee. That's coffee grown here in Sri Lanka. I like just black coffee, no sugar, and just the powder with the hot water, not instant, but the ground beans is a good enough way to make it, and an allowable way for me to make it myself and enjoy, along with reading your emails. So a cup of coffee and emails takes me back to my childhood, long before emails, and probably it was a cup of tea, or the very most exotic Nescafe in the 70s. But we used to have, back in those days, something called the Agony Aunt, or an Agony Aunt. One particular Agony Aunt in one of my grandmother's newspapers, what we refer to as a tabloid. I don't even know if it's still in existence, and I'm sure it's okay to mention the newspaper The Sun of the 1970s. Whether it exists still or not, I wouldn't know. They had an Agony Aunt called the heading to her column was Dear Deirdre, I think, if I remember rightly. And I used to enjoy reading those letters that were written in, or indeed my grandmother would read them out sometimes whilst we had a cup of tea at around this time, when I wasn't at school, in school holidays. And it's interesting that nothing changes. Technology changes, means of communication changes, media, as they call it now, is very different to that of the past. It used to be the press, and we had television, a few channels only, and the cinema. Now we have all of this stuff in the palm of our hands. But your problems don't change. Okay, the majority and most of the content of the emails I receive, one could consider to be of an esoteric, spiritual nature, concerning inquiries concerning practice, Buddhism, and the practice thereof. How to attain enlightenment, how to become free from suffering in this lifetime. How do we follow the Noble Eightfold Path and progress towards Nibbana? But the questions really are more orientated around the hindrances, the obstacles in the way of that. So in that context, a lot of communication I receive, and I'm very happy to receive, I'm very happy to be Deirdre, the Agony Aunt, dear Deirdre, whom I'm pretty sure wasn't always one individual, and very possibly was a collection of journalists with nothing better to do other than to grab the letters out of the Deirdre basket, and from their own experience, and together all put together a suitable answer to be published or answers to be published. This is what we're doing here. This is what the sangha is there to offer each other within their midst, brothers and sisters in the Dharma, ordained monks and ordained nuns, helping each other out with the more intricate details of the practice and the way we live in community, and also lay people amongst themselves with their knowledge of the Dharma, helping each other, but also expanding on that by approaching the sangha, coming to the temple, coming to the monasteries, and in these more modern days, in this kind of platform, this environment, discussing, as we do, the nature of our practice and those hindrances, those obstacles, those problems, which are everyday life difficulties, issues and problems. In the time of the Buddha, you could say the Buddha was the Agony Aunt, the Deirdre of the time. But the approach was very different, in that in order to help everyone else, the Buddha knew he had to find the cause of his own suffering or dissatisfaction, and it was his practice, not only in this lifetime or in his lifetime, but in many eons of previous countless lifetimes of practice, that led him to becoming the awakened one, which is what the word Buddha means, leaving us with what we call Buddhism, which is actually the teachings of the Buddha. That is the legacy of the Buddha, his teachings, we call the Dharma, and his close disciples whom he ordained into the sangha, that is, which in subsequent generations is the sangha of today. That lineage you see today, this lineage you see today, goes right back to those very first disciples of the Buddha 2,568 years ago. So when we take refuge in the Buddha, it is out of respect, remembering the teacher, his teachings, the Dharma, and the sangha, the teachers of that Dharma, or devoted practitioners of that way of life. The Buddha set down through 45 years of practice and teaching and formation of that sangha in the Vinaya Pitaka, our basket, our collection of rules, or in fact our code of conduct, the way we behave, the way we practice. And the teachings in the Sutta Pitaka, the basket, the collection of books containing all of the then and now written down and translated into our own languages, discourses, the words of the Buddha, the actual teachings of the Buddha that we're all becoming and have become very familiar with, or are getting to know. But what he taught was the simple Four Noble Truths of suffering, the cause of suffering, that there is an end of suffering, and the path leading to the end of suffering. Now Deirdre of the 1970s, or whatever equivalent form there is these days, can in fact answer every problem they're faced with, however complex, with that. Well, there is suffering. There is a cause, there is an end, and there is a path leading to that end. But not only would that not make for very good reading material, it would sound a little bit uncaring, even facetious, if you were to reply, well, you know, that's suffering, that's life. So our job as sangha and your job as lay people helping each other, but our jobs as in humanity, as compassionate people, is to take those core teachings, that idea of the Four Noble Truths, and the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, and apply it intelligently to any circumstances you are faced with, firstly in your own lives, and then presented with when people come to you for your help, guidance, advice, or assistance. But what actually does not change is the nature of those problems. In terms of geography, if you take family problems from, say, my own home country, the UK, England, they are very different to family problems that you might find in India, even in the modern age. Because cultural differences are such that family ties are regarded with different and varying degrees of importance, responsibilities, ways of behaving and associations with family members, even distant relatives, are very different in modern Western countries to that of even modern, to this day, Eastern family environments. And to some extent, coming from the former, when advising on the latter, I cannot come from a place of experience. We in the West leave our family homes at a young age when we're first teenagers, 16 or 18. When we leave full-time education, or even before that, if we're going to college or university, are off to live alone, away from the family home. Whereas even to this day, in the East or in the Western, in the Asian countries I've lived in India, and probably here and in Thailand, people will stay with their families, living with the mother and father in the family environment for considerably longer, until they marry and have families of their own. So this actually creates many different problems that could be considered agonies for the agony aunt to deal with. And in terms of time, problems of today are somewhat unheard of in the past, whereas also problems from the past are somewhat unheard of today. So we have geographical and we have historical reference when looking and dealing with issues concerning our overall life and practice within the realms of the Dharma, but also just generally in life, coexistence in humanity, in society, in communities, or alone. What is common, however, other than the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, which is always the ultimate answer, is the cause. So there is suffering, there is a cause of suffering, which can be summed up as desire, but is more a more detailed and relevant explanation is the kilesas, the Pali word, or defilements. So the defilements of greed, of hatred and delusion. Lobha, dosa, moha are the Pali words. These defilements of greed, hatred and delusion are essentially the basis of desire. Greed is desire for having something, wanting more of, and being unsatisfied, just getting thirstier and thirstier for more. Hatred is just not wanting something or a situation you do have, and building up aversion, ill will or hatred towards that way of being, feeling, taste, or individual or situation. Greed, hatred. Delusion is not necessarily ignorance. You can be very intelligent, but still not how to really know how to use the information. But to have all the information and no understanding of how to put it into practice and use it is delusion. So that is where we see many a time, over and over again, we see people overthinking, getting too complex with what ultimately is a simple problem. We live in our heads. These thinking brains are, after all, who and what we think we are, along with this physical body. But this thinking brain, as I've spoken of at length recently with regards to the khandhas, is not us. It is not a personality. This is electrochemical reactions working, a computer, a memory, a calculator, everything to keep this body working, performing throughout its short lifetime. But it too, this thinking brain, has a short lifetime. Nama Rupa, thinking brain, with all its associated feelings, consciousness, perception, and the formations out of all of those, from information received through the sense doors of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. It produces mental formations, or sankhara in the Pali word. And we've come to believe this is us. That is delusion. Because when we know the witness citta mind that sees this, and will see this body and this thinking brain die, without being affected, unless it's still tied, tethered, attached, thinking of self. Now we know of anicca, impermanence, dukkha, suffering, as I've just spoken of, and anatta, not self. That's what it means. This is not the self. Now all of these problems dear Deirdre was trying to tackle were about self. Oh, what this person said to me or thinks of me, and what I think of this, and how I feel, I, me, feel about this problem. Now, there is nothing wrong with using terminology such as I and me. Someone writes to me avoiding I've got to be careful what I say these days, but pronouns like I and me, or if that's even the right word for them, can be used by way of conventional speech, rather than writing these khandhas are affected by thus, or this, that, and the other. It's quite ridiculous, isn't it? And unnecessary. If you say, I'm suffering, I know you're suffering. Yes, it's your physical body, your thinking brain, and indeed your citta, your mind, that is suffering. But I also understand you may also have a good grip of understanding that there is no self. And I, in that context, is with wisdom, panya, wisdom, not deluded. But when is it, oh, I, me, in the sense of ignorance, is when, why do I have to have this pain? Why do I have to be diagnosed with this disease? Why did my wife leave me? Why did my husband leave me? Why is my house falling down? Now that is of the deluded nature, in that it is not understanding that that is normal. That is life. That is suffering. That is worldly existence, which we call in Pali samsara. But likewise, we can't out of compassion, say to everybody, well, that's samsara. What will be, that's life. Que sera, sera. It's all well and good, but flippant and somewhat sometimes can be considered a little uncaring or even facetious. But we look and apply the Dharma thoughtfully to the experience that either we or someone else is having that is causing the suffering. We identify the cause of the suffering, and then we prescribe the necessary antidote or cure, help, assistance, medicine towards aiding, alleviating that suffering. Now this could be perhaps where someone is not keeping the precepts, and you would emphasize the aspect of precepts. It could be where someone is perhaps not meditating ever or enough, when you can perhaps prescribe more meditation, samadhi. Or it's perhaps as a result of not understanding a particular concept. When we talk about referring to the suttas, talk about the words of the Buddha, to develop wisdom and understanding, panya, in that nature. So it isn't however complex the question, whether it's relating to practice directly in relation to Dharma, meditation, or the development of wisdom, or whether it's of a more mundane nature, where my mother doesn't want me to go to this particular event or do this particular thing, or I'm being encouraged to finish my education and all I want to do is ordain and become a monk. Or on the other extreme, people have just fed up with all the things that are going on in the world and have lost their sense of compassion. This too is by no means a high, unattainable, esoteric ideal for consideration, but is also, just as much as the mundane issues in life, attributed to these defilements, these kilesas. The problems manifesting themselves in your life are always as a result of greed, hatred, or delusion, or all three, or any combination thereof. So really, dear Deirdre, or the group of journalists who would club together over their coffee in the morning to cobble up these answers, had quite an easy job, because whilst they may not have been practicing Buddhists, and I'm sure they weren't, they still could say, well, look, you're not alone, this is quite a common problem. And we too must know that whatever our circumstances are, that is not what is the obstacle to our attainment. Being our attainment is to attain to Nibbana, or freedom from suffering in this lifetime, or just to have a nice, peaceful, calm meditation, or just to reduce or even eliminate our addictions or desires, overwhelming sometimes desires we have for something or another. Whatever it may be, the practice, keeping the 5 precepts and practicing meditation and developing wholesome mind states through guarding the senses. When I say guarding, not shutting down, not suppression, but being selective as to what you look at, what you listen to. Too much. I don't have social media, so I'm not I'm not coming from a place of experience, always talking about that, but I can certainly see, reading between the lines, that a lot of people get very mixed up because they have so much information in the palm of their hands. Now, there have always been wars going on in the world and atrocities. horrendous goings on throughout history, always. There's never been a time when the whole world has been at peace. But certainly when I was a child, you didn't know about what was going on in the rest of the world. Not much. It might get a very small slither of coverage after Deirdre's column, right at the back of the paper. Maybe just before the sporting section or something like that. But really there's been atrocities going on that are not always been in your face. Now, yes, it's great to know and have the information, and whereby we can help, be able to offer any support that we can. But what I'm saying is that this is nothing new. This is the nature of samsara. This is suffering. I mean, the cause of that suffering is indeed as a result of certain individuals' greed, hatred and delusion. It can always come back to that. If they were keeping 5 precepts, there would be no wars, would there, or atrocities, anything going on in the world. If everybody kept the 5 precepts, even just the first, there would be relatively little or no suffering in the world. But that isn't the case. However, it is the answer to all of these problems. But we can't change the world. We can only change ourselves. Not self in this egotistical view of this physical body and thinking brain. Oh, well, if I get a degree, a PhD in Buddhism, I can change the world. Well, it'll help, maybe, someone or something. But what you really need to do, what we need to do, is change ourselves and set an example for others to follow. And they will, they do. People will see how you live when you keep 5 precepts, when you practice meditation, when you develop wholesome mind states or wisdom of wholesome mind states through guarding your senses, restricting what you look at, what you read, and what you even talk about. Have mindfulness over all of your actions of body, speech and mind, what you think about. And when you have a problem, see how it fits in with regards to the defilements, the kilesas of greed, hatred and delusion. There's no better place to identify this than when we sit in meditation, because we can quickly identify 5 hindrances, 5 obstacles, which are based on those 3 defilements, kilesas. The obstacle of sensual desire, wanting something, a cup of coffee, or a cup of tea, or some pizza, rather than meditate, or to go and watch some entertainment, rather than meditate. Or ill will, oh, not this again, I don't think I can be bothered with it today, sitting still for half an hour, or an hour, or 3. Or the more you don't want to do it, the more you should do it, because then you can really see what ill will, aversion is all about. How that defilement coming from hatred, its root cause, is affecting your physical actions of body, speech and mind directly. What you do, how you behave. In this case, how you don't meditate, because you just accept it, get up, walk away. Rather than seeing it as something that will arise, and if you allow it time, and you observe it and note it only, will pass away, allowing you to develop peace and calm, tranquility of mind. And your body, time to relax and become comfortable with sitting for longer. So, sensual desire, ill will, laziness and tiredness, coming through boredom, through lack of stimulation, through not having an interest or enthusiasm for the practice, because we've become so used to distracting ourselves by feeding those sensual desires or running away from those ill wills into something else, our smartphones or our books or our televisions. And restlessness and worry. Worrying about what we've done in the past and being restless is about what's happening next in the future. The past has gone, the future hasn't happened yet. The point of this practice and observation of our meditation object is to be present in this moment, here and now. This is why the breath is such a wonderful meditation object, because wherever you are, it is too. You can always come back in the bus queue, at the ATM, even when in a difficult situation in work, socializing, or with the family. You'll often hear it said, well, just take a breath or breathe deeply when people are in states of anguish or having difficulties. Well, there's no truer word said, because you're bringing your attention, your conscientious awareness to the present moment, here and now, where there is ultimately no suffering. Because it is acceptance that this is the way it is. It's just that, here and now, the present moment. Only by projecting any suffering we experience into the future, or worrying about its being in the past, do we stretch it out from that moment and give it any leverage over us. Without the past, without the future, in the present moment, even pain is just for a moment, and we can all stand a moment of anything. An injection, a pinprick, a vaccination is very momentary. But if that was to continue for a long time, you'd notice it. But most of the suffering, we are responsible for continuing ourselves in our own minds, thus prolonging the suffering. Rather than seeing it as just that, it happened in the moment, now let it go. So I do enjoy reading all of these emails and your comments and questions there. Emails are private. The comments section on this YouTube platform is public, so are aired here. But those of you writing to me by email, unless you say otherwise, I don't discuss on here. But nevertheless, what is important to know is that however we feel about our own particular issue, however complex our family life is, however difficult this modern age problem is. Now, like I said, family problems in the West are different to those in the East. Historical problems are different to modern day problems. But nevertheless, however complicated they are and difficult they are, you are never alone. There are so many billions of people, 8 billion people on this planet living today, suffering with exactly the same issues. If not exactly the same problems, based on the same causes. And that is ultimately not wanting to have that disagreement, not wanting to have that pain, not wanting to have that discomfort. Hatred, ill will, aversion, or desire, not getting enough of what you want, not getting enough food, not getting enough alcohol, not getting enough drugs, not getting enough entertainment, relationships, all of these things. Trying to satiate insatiable cravings. All come from greed. Greed, hatred, delusion. And delusion is just not seeing this clearly, not understanding this directly for yourself, experientially. And that is what this practice is. Gradually eroding through the practice, gradually eroding these defilements, these kilesas. Because as soon as you fall short on sila, don't keep all of the 5 precepts, or you don't meditate, you reduce the time you spend in meditation, or you're not meditating at all, or you are relaxed and not guarding the sense door, so you're not protecting your mind, developing wholesome mind states. So in other words, whenever you are falling short of sila, samadhi, panya, moral virtue, meditation and wisdom, you are allowing the kilesas to win. Only through developing diligently in the practice, developing moral virtue, sila, keeping all 5 precepts, practicing meditation and developing wholesome mind states, do you build the strength to weaken those kilesas, weaken those defilements. And as soon as you start to weaken them, you quickly and experientially see for yourself the results. And when I look at any situation of any detailed background in front of me with regards to your inquiries, that is what's going through my mind to find the answer. And what the Buddha said is that we can do this for ourselves. So, can you help me? I am suffering, is the question. Yes. The teachings of the Buddha can give you the power to help yourself be free from suffering. That is the important thing to take on board. It is not an esoteric spiritual ideal that requires huge intellectual understanding of Pali, Sanskrit, Latin, Greek, whatever you like, but in your own simple mother tongue, understanding that you're just human among 8 billion other humans whom naturally, mostly through genetics and survival, have developed greed, hatred and delusion. Greed to make us successful in life, to evolve. So not to be totally disregarded, but to be applied appropriately. Hatred also, by way of protection, it encompasses fear, which is all for a very good reason. So we don't walk off a cliff, or eat poisonous food, or get poisoned by snakes or eaten by tigers. We have the good sense to run away. But delusion is that whole aspect of the mind, the thinking brain, that has developed a way of masking everything over through distraction. So greed and hatred are just natural. What has grown out of those is, but has always been there, the tendency towards delusion, to just not see the truth, not see the Four Noble Truths. Well, there is suffering and there is a cause. But to mask over it by distracting yourself, in the very literal sense, as you age. One wears more makeup, or one dyes one's hair, or gets faces lifted up, or tummies tucked in, and such like. Even the young are forever doing things to their bodies to make them seem what is fashionably appealing at the time. And so different as you look back over the ages. Something that's considered attractive today would have been considered quite monstrous historically, and vice versa. So how shallow is that masking? This is delusion. It's also very human. and all of us humans that are alive today, and going back the countless numbers of our, ancestral past, are proof and evidence of just that very nature of how we don't see our own suffering for what it is. And ultimately, in the awakening of the Buddha and his enlightenment, he did see this. And out of compassion for all beings, but as he recognized, there are only those few with little dust in their eyes, meaning only a few will really get this and understand it. But it's worth sharing. And aren't we so lucky that he did, or was persuaded to, because otherwise we would not be sharing the Dharma necessarily today, as we are in this fashion, so directly related to the actual words of the Buddha in that time so long ago, millennia, 2,568 years ago. Those Agony Aunt answers to those Agony Aunt questions were the same then as they are today. Nothing has changed. On the face of it, yeah, everything's so very different. There were probably just a few million people on the planet then. I don't know, if a billion or so. Now there are so many more. Technology, everything has changed. But what hasn't changed is suffering. The cause of suffering, and that you can be free from suffering in this lifetime. And what hasn't changed is the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, as to how to bring that into effect yourself and experience it for yourself. See it firsthand. And when we despair of all the suffering in the world that's going on, just know that the effort you put in towards helping yourself is by no means selfish, because you are helping others. They will see the evidence of your kindness. Without you don't have to be altruistic, going out saving all of the people in your immediate area. If you can, then do so, or try. But what is most important is to make sure that you are completely practicing for your own liberation in the first instance, because that will be seen by others, known by others. It doesn't have to be seen by others, known by others via this kind of means, where quite a few people can watch on YouTube or whatever. Just living in any community, even alone. I live alone here. And most people around here, they've never heard of this YouTube channel or even YouTube, because it's just not a thing in these parts. But they all know I'm living here alone, doing my best. And that's enough for them to know that they are doing the right thing by giving me support to enable that. And as well as helping me, it helps them. And this grows outwardly from your own hub of practice. Even in the smallest possible way, just keeping the 5 precepts. Really think about that. Don't kill any living being. The precepts are very simple, black and white. Don't kill anything. Don't take anything that isn't given to you, so don't steal anything. Refrain from sexual misconduct. Don't lie. Not even white lies, no excuses. Any excuses are just ways to justify breaking that precept. Just don't. If necessary, say nothing. No comment. And don't take any intoxicants that dull the mind and lead to being relaxed or breaking any of those 4 other precepts. If you just keep those 5 precepts, people and you don't break the local laws. If there are, I'm just talking because people have different local laws with regards to relationships and family behaviour and that kind of thing in different countries. But of course one has to be considerate of those. However, the 5 precepts are so wonderful in that even though they were devised 2,568 years ago, really, in terms of the Buddha making us determined to take 5 precepts as lay practitioners, even today, I don't think there is any society where they don't apply. They're certainly going to do you no harm. You're not going to get into trouble for keeping the 5 precepts. Whereas in most societies, if you get caught, you will get into trouble for breaking even just one of them. So they're as applicable now as they were back in the time of the Buddha. And there's only 5. Okay, for us monks, we've got 227. Or you can take 8 on the holy days. Take 8 precepts, 1 day a week or once a month. To just really not change because not having any entertainment and not eating in the afternoon. There's nothing morally wrong with entertainment or eating in the afternoon, or lazing around on high furniture, or wearing makeup or jewellery, beautification. There's nothing morally wrong with any of that. But if you don't do those things, so you keep 8 precepts once a week or once a month, just on a regular occasion, then it helps you support your practice of meditation and of developing wisdom. And it certainly also helps keep in check and support and keep focus on the 5 precepts. But just that alone is going to provide enormous help to the rest of the world that will last. It may take longer, but it will last. Because imagine if everybody's doing it that's watching this video for the next week, keeping 5 precepts, what a difference that will make. More so than if each of you all, sent some money to one particular war zone or this war zone or that war zone and carried on breaking the precepts. That would have very little effect historically. But for your own practice, your own development, karma, and future rebirth, or freedom from suffering, attaining to freedom from suffering in this lifetime, liberation from future rebirth, cutting off of those ties to samsara, to this troublesome world of suffering, and agony aunts, dear Deirdres and problem pages. For freedom from all of that, all you have to do is keep 5 precepts and meditate, and the wisdom will come along with that of its own accord. Now, of course, generosity, giving dana, is also helping support those activities. And devotional practices remind you of the Buddha, remind you of the Dharma, remind you of the sangha, taking refuge in the triple gem, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and taking precepts. You don't have to go to a special place or perform a special ceremony. If it's available, it's useful and you can, but if not, just to yourself, remind yourself, I shall refrain from killing, I shall refrain from stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and taking intoxicants. Today, just for today. And tomorrow you do the same. Don't worry about what happened yesterday. Don't worry about tomorrow. Just today. Just for today. We can all do that and make a huge difference. So I enjoy the emails, the information, and what is reassuring for me by reading, however complex the problems might be, however some of them I might not fully comprehend because of either geography or time. I've been out of the loop, you see, for some years now. I don't have social media, I don't have the newspapers even. Well, who does, I suppose, these days? But I don't listen to the news or the radio or the television things. So, and because of the nature of the way I use YouTube, all that comes up on my screen are other monks, and they're generally of my own persuasion also, and their talks. And I'm not even subscribed to many of those. So, YouTube learns the ways it can be of use to you somehow by some modern means. And so through that, I'm a little bit out of touch with some of the ways people think and language they use. But I'm not inexperienced in life. I ordained late in life, and I can relate all of these issues to my own experiences historically, and those that are common throughout the world with all people over time, and probably always will be. So it gives me reassurance in, not that I need it, but confidence in the Dharma, in that how the way it's explained in the suttas is just as applicable today in this modern age as it was back 2,500 years ago. Oh, I think on that note I'll conclude the talk you've given. I've received many nice comments about the dog that made an appearance, a miraculous appearance when mentioned, and it hasn't appeared today, and I think it only barked once, but I think it's probably worn out and tired because for the last 2 nights it's been howling, keeping me awake. I've had very little sleep. Why, I don't know. Maybe it's the full moon. But nevertheless, we say Sabah Sabe Sata Sukhi Hotu. May all beings be happy and well. And thank you for all those kind comments and all of your support and encouragement. For that is the reason I do this. I know there's someone there listening, and that makes me very happy to know it's useful. So on that note, whatever is useful, you can use it, and if it's not, then just let it go and forget about it for now. Until next time, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu.